Thank you everyone for joining today's session of Share.Solve.Evolve. Today's topic is 911 goes to Washington. And we have with us today three guest panelists, Jonathan Gilad, VP of Government Affairs from NENA, Kia Lampkins, Director of Emergency Communications out of North Texas ECC, and then Terry Goswick, the Executive Director out of North Texas ECC. Today's host is Jeremy DeMar from Intrado, and I will be helping moderate today's session in the background. So if you have any questions, please use the Q&A feature found in your Teams kind of upper panel and go ahead and type in your questions and we will address them at the end. Thank you so much. And I'm going to turn it over to Jeremy.
Well, thank you, Marie, and good afternoon, good morning. Still good morning? No, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us today for another, what I'm sure is going to be a very insightful and candid conversation on Share.Solve.Evolve. This month's installment is action-packed in many ways. We've got a great group of panelists here, which I'm very excited to engage with and talk about, all on the topic of 911 Goes to Washington, which, believe it or not, is coming up next week. So this year has just been plugging away so quickly. I was just commenting with my wife a couple days ago. I'm like, we're already at the end of February. This is just blowing me away. So I just want to remind those of you, though, if you're joining us as a repeat viewer, welcome back. We're glad to have you. If you're a first timer for Intrado Share.Solve.Evolve session, what I would ask you to do is if you want to engage with any of our panelists at any particular time, you'll see a Q&A button at the top of your screen. If you click on that, that drops you into the Q&A field. You can feel free to ask any questions that you have at that point. I'll do my best to kind of pay attention to those questions as they're coming along, but Marie, who always does an exceptional job, will be watching in the background in case one slips by me, but we'll absolutely have time during the course of the event and at the end of the session today to do some Q&A. But without further ado, what I'd love to do first to kind of kick things off is have our panelists introduce themselves, and then we'll jump right into it. Now, the way that I usually do this is I start clockwise and I start going around. So today, Kia happens to be the first. So ladies first. Kia, why don't you tell everybody about yourself, and we'll look forward to hearing more about you.
Yeah, thank you. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Kia Lampkins, and I am the Director of Emergency Communications with NTEC. That is the North Texas Emergency Communications Center. We dispatch and take emergency and non-emergency calls for 4 cities. That's Carrollton, Addison, Coppell, and Farmers Branch. And I am so happy to be here with you today.
And very happy that both you and Terry are down there overseeing operations in Carrollton. My mom and my sister still live in Carrollton, so it's good to know they're in good hands if anything happens. Hopefully they never have to call you, but it's good knowing you guys are there. So thanks, Kia. Jonathan, you're next up in my counterclockwise or my clockwise rotation. So go right ahead, my friend.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Jonathan Gilad, Vice President for Government Affairs at NENA, or the National Emergency Number Association. The association that is hosting 911 Goes to Washington next week, so just a little bit busy right now, but I'm thrilled to be here to talk to you all about next week's program.
Well, Jonathan, before you send me a nastygram saying I haven't registered yet, I just registered, so I'm all set. I got my confirmation email. Everything's good.
I actually did notice that this morning, so thank you.
I'm glad I caught you that. I'm glad I caught you. Terry, hello, sir. Terry, I do a lot of things at full transparency. Terry and I work on some committees together. We do a lot of stuff. We were just at SBP can we say a month ago, a few weeks ago?
Exactly,
and now we're here. So I'll stop.
Yes.
You go ahead.
Yes, I'm Terry Goswick. I'm the Executive Director at NTEC. I work with Kia and down here in North Texas. Super excited about going to 911 Goes to Washington and getting to learn what is the legislative priorities for this next coming year and how NENA and the other national organizations are working together to better the organizations and the whole career field. So I'm excited to get to Washington to learn and then to start meeting with our representatives.
Well, again, and Terry, thank you. Thrilled to have all of you in the session today. One of the ways that we select participants/panelists for our sessions is we want to make sure that they can absolutely add something to the conversation and the dialogue relative to our talking point. And clearly, with 911 Goes to Washington, with Jonathan being here representing NENA, and of course, both Terry and Kia being here, both planning on attending 911 Goes to Washington when we all go there next week. It's going to be a great session. So let's jump right into it. Jonathan, and just to kind of provide a little bit more context for those of you maybe watching for the first time, we as a group will meet. We meet 3 or 4 days prior to this session. We kind of go over some key talking points that we want to cover during the course of the conversation. So if you think this is just me coming up with the perfect questions, I have to admit that's not the case. There was some prep work that went on here. So there hopefully won't be too many surprises, but if you guys throw questions at us during the course of the session today, maybe that'll be the surprise we're looking for. So with that, Jonathan, let me start with you. For those in the 911 business, maybe that don't know a lot about 911 Goes to Washington. Now, that could be anybody from a frontline call taker, dispatcher, telecommunicator, all the way up to a director, maybe a first-time director that maybe hasn't gone to this. What I'd like to do is provide a little bit of a little foundational knowledge, a little groundwork about the history of 911 Goes to Washington, why NENA got behind it, why it's important, and then of course maybe we talk a little bit more about we'll kind of push into what is going to be going on next week as we all get there. So hopefully you can provide a little background for us to get us started.
Sure. Yeah. So thanks for the question. For myself, this is my third GTW, and I love it. But GTW actually, it's been around for at least over 20 years. And I was actually talking to Brian Fons, who's our CEO, and actually asked him that question. When did 911 Goes to Washington start? So it has been over 20 years. And what this conference is, it started kind of small, but it's grown over the years. But essentially, it is what we call in DC parlance a fly-in. It is when a particular group comes into DC to advocate on behalf of their profession, their community, or their industry. In our case, it's the profession of 911 and public safety. And this is an ideal time for folks from the 911 profession, whether you're industry, whether you're someone who's had a great experience with 911, or you're, like you said, a frontline staffer, or a manager, CEO, administrator, state director, the whole gamut. This is a great time for them to come to DC and educate lawmakers and policymakers about 911. Everyone always kind of assumes that, hey, if you're in government, you probably know what government does and how things work, and that's not always the case. Particularly in Congress, where a staffer may handle 15, 20 issues, and it's impossible for any single person to be an expert in those areas. So having folks like yourselves come to DC, educate staff and members of Congress about 911, what are their needs? Our priorities this year is funding for next generation 911 and reclassification. So there is that element of educating them and getting to know them. And I would say this year, over other years, every year is important, but this year we have a new administration and we also have a new Congress. Now you just say, well, we have a new administration every time, but it is a new administration in terms of it is Trump's second administration, but it is still new. There's new staff coming in, and there's a new Congress. So it's an extraordinarily great opportunity to educate all those folks about the importance of 911 and the need to fund next generation 911.
Awesome. Thanks, Jonathan. Kia, I want to go to you next with kind of dovetailing a little bit at what Jonathan's talking about. When you and I had an opportunity to talk, you had talked a little bit about the preparation for these visits, and I can tell you that from somebody who is over the course of their 911 career has sat in just about every seat I think you can sit in the center, from call taker all the way up to director. I got to tell you that when I first was reading about 911 Goes to Washington very early on in my career, I was a little bit intimidated because I was like, well, we're going out, we're talking to elected officials. I probably had been to DC a handful of times as a kid, maybe on my 8th grade trip or something like that, but hadn't spent a lot of time there. But certainly now I'm going to walk into these congressional buildings, go in and talk to folks. It's a little bit intimidating. So I was hoping maybe you could share some thoughts with us for those people that maybe are on the fence or not sure about some of the things that they might be thinking about when they make this trip.
Yeah, no worries about that. I was definitely one of those newbies. And I'm with you, Jeremy. I was able to kind of grow my way into this 911 and this director role, and it definitely can be intimidating. The subject matter, if you're not familiar with it, can seem just out of the ballpark and you don't understand what's happening. But I will say, this conference does a great job of really breaking down in the opening session what you're going to be uncovering, what the talking points are, how to prepare yourself. One thing I will say is that while the talking points that you will get you in the door, I always encourage leaders and attendees to use your influence and opportunity to bring up things that are more close to you. Cybersecurity is part of the NG 911 strategy. And even prior to your visit, research those people that you're going to be meeting with, those staff members. What are their connections? What are their priorities? What are you looking for your center, for your area that you want to communicate with them about? And again, that's all about building that network and that connection so they understand truly what 911 is. We're still kind of lumped up into the whole public safety and we're police or we're fire. We are a separate entity, a very valuable entity. So this is an opportunity to really educate those legislators and those local representatives and let them know what 911 is and the needs of the centers.
Yeah, I love that. Very well said, Kia.
Yeah.
Thanks. Terry, I want to throw it to you real quick. One of the points you brought up in our pre-session conversation was coming ready to learn, right? Because I think a lot of folks go in there and, that maybe I'm going for the first time and I'm like, I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna show my elected officials what they need, but obviously I think approach is a big part of this. I think having a little background knowledge, but you talked about being ready to learn. I was hoping maybe you could expand on that theory a little bit.
So it's a lot of us we spend our day-to-day worried about our center, our local politics, our local needs that we have, whereas NENA is focusing on the overall 911 next gen push, the industry as a whole. So NENA does a really good job of preparing everyone to go. My first year that I went, I did not watch the video. Jonathan has done a video for everyone to prepare you to actually to see what you're about to see, to learn what you're about to learn. And the first day at the GTW is an introduction, obviously, by the NENA staff. Jonathan, I'm assuming, will do what he's done in the past. He's going to give a legislative update, but then they also bring in high-ranking officials from the federal government. And they give what they're going to do, what their agendas are, and they let us know what the status is there. This year, like Jonathan was saying, unlike past, it is a transition year. So obviously things are still in flux, so we're kind of fitting in where we get in. But I really encourage everyone to go and learn, like Kia was saying. We spend a lot of time learning who we're going to go see. And we do a lot of educating for themselves. We try to do our best to educate the representative staffers, because the staffers really are going to be the ones that you're going to speak to. And they're the ones who are going to do the educating of the representative or the senator that you're going to meet with. So really take that time, know what you want to say. Know what you want to say. NENA's going to give you some talking points. NENA is going to also give you some takeaways that you can leave with the actual representative staff members. But you can still educate them on your needs in your area. It still is personal to you in your center. So really, in 5 minutes, try to get what you have done in 5 minutes. And it's not easy. So I do encourage everyone to practice and to really spend time talking to a coworker about what you want to get across so that you can know what you're going to do, because their time is they're budgeting 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and then they've got another meeting coming. So
say now would be a good time, if you're not familiar with the term, to be working on your elevator pitch. If you're not familiar with what an elevator pitch is, get your elevator pitch together, people. That's what you need to do.
Yes.
Jonathan, I want to come back to you, kind of talking a little bit about Terry's points. Generally speaking, each year we do our 911 Goes to Washington. There's usually initiatives that we're really kind of driving. And two of the key points that you had brought to our attention in the pre-session was obviously the 911 Saves Act. That continues to be something that we really need to be a strong sounding board for. And then you talked about funding as well. I was hoping maybe you could kind of expand on two of those areas and some of the activities you see happening during next week.
Yeah, so thanks. I would say this year, I'm always hopeful and encouraging that we can get these things over the finish line. I'm especially more so this time around. I kept saying it's a new administration and it's a new Congress. Typically, the first year and a half of a new Congress is when it's the most active. We're not right now in that sweet period between they just got elected and they don't have to worry about a primary, or they don't have to worry about general election until 2026. So we have that golden opportunity in the next year and a half to get things going. The SAVES Act, just a little bit more about it for folks on the conference or the webinar. It would reclassify 911 professionals as public safety personnel. And this is under, it can get a little wonky, it's under the standard occupational classification system. And that's done by the Office of Management and Budget. Currently, 911 is categorized as clerical administrative. And obviously, aside from that, that doesn't reflect the work that 911 does. It also hinders other things, such as if a state were to reclassify and wanted to put the 911 professionals as part of their public safety, I would say, benefits, they wouldn't be able to because the federal government doesn't recognize it. It also hinders data collection. So people always ask, or it's kind of asked, how many 911 professionals do we have in the US? There are estimates. NENA uses the 100,000 or so odd estimate, but there's no way to actually, at least on a data perspective, be able to pull that consistently across the country. So 911 SAVES would reclassify 911 professionals as public safety. The second funding, the priority is next generation 911, and we've been talking about this for a while, and it is, and this would be about $15 billion in government grants to deploy next generation 911 nationally. And in our effort to be as bipartisan as possible, we also have it paid for. So it wouldn't cost anything, it wouldn't cost taxpayer dollars anything or cause any more deficit. We would use FCC, or Federal Communications Commission, auction spectrum revenues. Sorry for getting a little bit in the weeds here, but they do auction off spectrum, and that's proceeds the government makes, and then use that proceeds to fund this grant program. Our hope is to get that across the finish line in this Congress, but we are hammering across this year, like I was mentioned before, cybersecurity. Congress is very attuned to the risks of cybersecurity right now. There's been a lot of high-profile hacks that have happened, not necessarily not 911, but across the government, across other critical infrastructure. So they are very attuned to the need for increased cybersecurity for 911. And so that's a point that we're going to be hammering home on Capitol Hill next week. Is cybersecurity is important for the federal government. It's important for national defense, but it's even more so important for public safety. If there is a public security threat, people call 911. I don't even know if they would know how to call Department of Homeland Security. Usually they call 911. And being able to have those resilient and secure networks is critical for our nation's public safety.
Yeah, and I mean, we talked a little bit about the relationship side of this as well, and we're going to talk more about relationships. But Kia, I'm just going to keep playing round robin, and like I said, if you guys want to chime in wherever, that's cool. But we'll just kind of keep it going here. I think there's a lot of folks, especially, and I referenced in earlier comments, some of the folks that maybe are newer to the role, right? They've joined 911. They've only been doing it for a couple of years. They're not really sure of what the value add of them going up there would be. Maybe they feel I strictly answer calls, or I dispatch, whatever happens to be. I'm not a supervisor or director. Obviously, I see incredible value at all levels of the 911 space, and the biggest reason being each one of those people bring unique experiences and ideas to the table relative to what's going on with their particular profession. But Kia, can you speak a little bit to why this isn't just 911 directors and managers going? I mean, you guys, the two of you, I mean, Terry and Kia, you operate in a center that has a tremendous amount of support. The folks that you represent within your jurisdiction, and of course the folks that you and Terry report to, are very supportive of your efforts. So you're in a great situation relative to that. You do a lot with training. Terry talks a lot about training and getting his folks out. But can you talk a little bit about the value that each level would bring if they were going here for the first time, whether it be a call taker, dispatcher, combined supervisor, whatever it happens to be?
Absolutely. For me, and the experience that I've gathered is that it bridges the gap A lot of times with your frontline employees, that's coming from your telecommunicators, if that's your title, specialists, ECS, whatever the title is for your dispatchers or call takers, it allows for them to see a different side that upper leadership deals with on a daily basis. You get a little bit into the politics, and as Jonathan mentioned earlier, while it can get a little weedy, it still gives you that necessary education information to equip you with the knowledge to pass that along. I take full advantage of networking with other people. So not only is it going to the Hill visits, but it's really utilizing the people that are there to attend because they're just like you. They're trying to find better ways of operating. They're trying to network and build connections. They're trying to find out what is this 911 goes to Washington. And this call in itself is a prime example of educating. So if someone's on here who's not able to go this year, you now have a stepping stone to know more about what's happening so you can take it back to your centers and educate. You hit the nail on the head. We have great partnership with our cities. It's absolutely amazing. And we also encourage them as well to go. When they have questions about 911, Terry and I are very quick to respond and give them the information they need and invite them to seminars and sessions such as this. So again, it's really built for everybody at every level. Don't be afraid of getting weedy. I've pulled Jonathan aside. I've pulled people aside. I have questions. Dive into it with me a little deep because I don't know what's happening. And that's okay. There's no dumb question. There's no dumb response. We want that feedback. We want you to be inquisitive and want to know how to learn and develop your leadership and your organization.
And I think all of us have been in the business long enough to know that if you have a question on something, there's a good likelihood 10 other people have that same question. So
Absolutely.
if you don't ask it, or maybe you'll encourage other people to ask it. But Terry, let's talk a little bit more about relationships. One of the things Jonathan mentioned, again, I keep referencing our pre-session, but you talked a little bit about the experience of 911 Goes to Washington in a post, event.
Yes.
Scenario. So I think a lot of people go to 911 Goes to Washington. They're excited. Maybe they've succeeded in getting a couple of meetings set up with their elected officials from their respective districts. They go out, they have these meetings, but then they come home and they're like, "What's next? What do I do?" You had kind of a compelling story about this. How you came back and you continued to drive that messaging home. Can you expand on that a little bit?
So we took a different approach. NENA does a great job, but they bring staff to Washington for a couple of days a year. Well, there's so much more that we need to get done. I mean, Jonathan was talking about cybersecurity. The education that has to go into that alone, we could spend weeks talking to them because I would venture to say vast majority of our representatives do not know how the technical side of 911 works. And historically, no one's needed cybersecurity to answer the phone. Well, now phones are all on routers, they're all digital, they're all in a cloud. That creates a cybersecurity need. So what Intech's approach has been, we go up there, we learn from Jonathan, and they bring in a really good group of federal employees. We learn from them. We go meet with the staff on the Hill. Well, like every single representative, they spend half of their time at their home office. That is where they do a lot of their work. So they have two offices, their DC office and their home office. So we take the approach of we go meet and we build a relationship with the staff at the representative or senator's office. And we try to constantly stay in contact with them, be it just a check-in to see if where is the senator or the congressperson are they in the home office or they're not? And we build a relationship with them. And then we also build a relationship with the home office staff. Yeah. We come home and we basically do a complete 911 Goes to Washington recap at the home office. So everything that we did in DC, we do with our representatives and our senators. We have Cornyn and we have Cruz here in Texas. Both are very cooperative, I'll say, with Intech. They've been very receptive to us. Them and their staffs, very receptive. We've had congresswomen come out to our office numerous times. They sponsor events. They get involved with our center. We're educating them. So when they have questions, it's not unheard of for them to reach out to my staff, reach out to me and ask a question. That is a relationship that is priceless because they're hearing the message from Jonathan and his team and the lobbyists up in DC, but they know someone firsthand in their district who they represent, who affects the people they serve, and they're able to find out the truth, and they're getting the same message. They get the same thing that they got in DC that they're getting locally. That is priceless. When you're needing to make changes, when you're needing to push the envelope, those relationships matter. And for them to be able to pick up the phone and call us, shoot us an email, priceless. And we go above and beyond. We'll sit here. Well, Kia and I believe at the end of March, I believe it is, we'll be in DC again. So we'll set meetings just to follow up, to go and say hi. Just follow up so they see our face again and they know that we're not here just for one day. We actually go in there, that this is a priority. We stay connected with them.
And we know how important it is to have those relationships. And I mean, relationships are really everything in a variety of different realms, but certainly in this, to be up there doing your thing, to go back and visit with your local, and that was a point, Terry, I can't remember whether you or Jonathan that raised it. You just kind of reiterated it though, that the folks, the delegates, the representatives in Washington, they may not make it back to the home district all that often, and vice versa, right? So you in many ways are kind of the conduit between those two. You're going to go up, you're going to have these great conversations. Now you're coming back and say, hey, I was talking with your colleagues up in DC last week, and whatever happened. So that's but that's awesome. The relationship piece. Yeah.
We're able to, we try to do our best because like you said, Jeremy, we're well represented and we're well supported at our organization, but that is not the case nationwide. So we're very deliberate in our message when we speak to them that we're an early adopter of technology. We're always one step. We're always pushing the envelope. We're always looking at what's next. Digital this, technology, IRI, always looking at our ways to enhance our technology. There are some places in America that are just barely able to answer the phone and they're still on copper. So that is the message we push, that 911 needs to be a federal priority, not a state, not a local priority, but a federal program.
I love
And
that.
to Terry's point, Jeremy, I did want to add, because he had a great point about just relationships in general. When you allow for your local legislators to come into your center, they're now too learning and educating and learning what 911 is. They're no longer just seeing just a fire department or just a police officer. They actually see who's answering the phone. We take them on the floor. They're able to take a tour and actually look and see the various technology that our dispatchers and our communication specialists have to operate. They're seeing the live 911 calls. They're hearing what they have to deal with. They're seeing the trauma and understanding more connected to what 911 actually is. So again, when we're talking about reclassification, that allows for them to see the professional environment that we have in our centers, the professional and skilled staff that we have to maintain 911. And it's not just, we applaud our police officers, we applaud our firefighters, we're in this together. But 911 is essential to making sure help gets to where it needs to go.
Yeah, and I love that. I love that you brought that up, Kia. And the Jonathan, were you going to say something?
Well, I just wanted to kind of emphasize the relationships part, but on and another element to it. NENA is on the Hill a lot, and we kind of do this. I mean, I do this all year round. However, me just going alone and saying, hi, Congressman X, Y, and Z, you should care about 911. When they have their constituents come into DC, it really shows them, hey, this is a priority for the people down in my state or my district. It also, aside from that, it's also important because if we're inserting 911 in the conversation, at least just by GTW alone, you'd be surprised how often it kind of triggers something in their mind. Let's say a different issue comes up. Let's say it's an issue about floods or whatever it is. All of a sudden they're thinking, hey, how does this affect 911? So just by coming in there and establishing that relationship, they know, oh, there's NENA, there's an association for that can put me in touch with the constituents in my district. So I just wanted to kind of circle back to that element.
Yeah, and I was going to say that. Oh, Terry, go ahead.
A lot of people may not know that every state has a captain that is really overseeing like the state's message, so that like in tech, we have in the state of Texas, we have and I've never met them, so I'm not trying to give them any props that they have not earned. They have done an amazing job coordinating the Texas delegates that are going up there. They've done a really good job of educating all of the members from Texas that are actually going to GTW. They're telling us who our representatives are. They're giving you information to, like he was saying, read. So if this is your first time, all you really need to do is just focus on your state, and it kind of makes it more easy to bite that first step. Learn who your state captains are and get engaged with them. They'll be more than happy to set up your appointments on the Hill or let you. Our first year, Kia and I just tagged along. Yeah. That's all we did. We tagged along with those that already knew. They had the meeting set up. We went to the coffee. I think it was called Coffee with Cruz. I mean, we went and we followed. Great. And it was a great first trip. It was a little overwhelming because I'd never done that when we went our first time. But getting with your state captains, great first step.
Yeah, and Kia brought up that point earlier, and I want to just kind of reiterate it. For those of you that are obviously 911 directors, managers of your centers, this isn't as big of a deal. But for those of you maybe that are frontline folks, where your directors, your managers are sending you in, just make sure you check with your leadership to make sure they're okay with you inviting your elected officials back. But for the most part, I would think that they would welcome these folks with open arms. So if they're willing to send you to DC to be lobbying and advocating for all things 911, I'm sure they would absolutely appreciate a visit from an elected official with a little bit of time to prepare. Of course, we don't want no surprise visits. But Jonathan, I want to come back to you real quick. We know that a lot of the folks that registered for this session today and of the folks that are on here right now, maybe are first timers, maybe really haven't experienced this, and that's why they're on here. And fortunately, your webinar from before, which you smartly held many weeks ago, so that people could see it and had time. But a lot of folks go to the big conferences, right? The APCOs, the NENAs, those kind of things. They're familiar with what goes on there. Maybe they go to their state conferences. SBP is a little more intimate, right? I love SBP down in Clearwater. We had a good time there. But this one is very unique in a lot of ways. So much, in fact, that you might have a lot more first timers here. What can a first timer expect when they get into DC? They're getting settled in. What are some things that they should be thinking about? What can they expect?
Well, I certainly they can expect some weird weather because DC in February is strange. So just be prepared for that. But yes, I would say GTW is a unique conference because the sessions are important. It's good to go on Monday to get the education, but I would say the focus of the event actually isn't at the hotel. It's actually on Capitol Hill. So it makes it a little bit more of an interesting conference, not sitting in a hotel the whole time. But for first-time folks, and GTW does tend to get a sizable number of first-time folks every year, which is fantastic, because it does educate the profession about advocacy, but also the first-time folks can experience a really great opportunity. We do have on that Sunday afternoon, I believe it's at 5 o'clock this year, we do have a meet and greet just for the first-time attendees with some of the state captains and some of our board members, and I'll be there to kind of go through all of this once more, go through our talking points, and kind of lay out what they should expect the next few days. Aside from that, I do suggest watching the webinar. I kind of go through a little bit more of the logistical things. Wear comfortable shoes. DC is kind of a formal town, so try to, unless you have like a uniform or something. But for the other things, I think just to re-echo what was said before by Kia, educate yourself and research about your members of Congress, your senator. People always sometimes ask, which representative should I go to? I work in District 1, but actually my center's in a different district. Either way, you're still a constituent. If you answer the phones in someone's district, you affect their constituents. But you vote somewhere else, you are a constituent technically, in my mind, in both members of Congress. So don't limit yourself in that. But if you don't have enough time, you can just focus on one. But educate yourself about your members of Congress. Watch the video. I do think kind of giving yourself the elevator talk a little bit. Even myself, who I do this a lot, I always kind of do a little kind of talk in the mirror first, or while I'm in the elevator, actually literally in the elevator, kind of going through my speech. But also, I would say most importantly, don't be nervous. I say that, and everyone's always nervous. It's nerve-wracking. But remember, in those meetings, you are the subject matter expert.
Yeah.
There is a staff member there. It can be intimidating. They're a member of Congress. They work for a member of Congress. But at the end of the day is you're the one educating them. And they appreciate that. And they know that. They actually want to learn. Most staff are very eager to learn about the issues and what's happening. Rarely rarely do these meetings get, I guess, either confrontational or dismissive. They want to learn. So try to put that, I guess, in your minds when you go, and just to kind of give yourself a little bit of a deep breath and remember that you are, in this case, the educator.
Yeah, and I've had people reach out to me in the past, ask me about it, and I was like, and they're like, well, what should I? And I'm like, number one, be humble. Recognize that we can always learn things, right? Be teachable. But also, to your point, Jonathan, recognize that they're looking to you to provide input and insight on things that they're not 100% versed on. So study up on some of these things, and you may even there's been stories about people that have gotten caught in the elevators with elected officials, and that the elevator pitch truly comes true. And it's like, what can you tell me about Next Gen 911? So be ready for these questions. You never know who you're going to be riding an elevator or walking up the steps with. Kia, you raised an interesting point earlier, and I don't think it got enough credit, so I want to come back to you on it. But Jonathan talked a little bit about you're doing a lot of walking while you're in DC. What are you talked a little bit about appropriate footwear, that kind of stuff. Maybe you can expand on that a little bit for the folks that haven't done this before.
Absolutely. Jonathan mentioned it's quite formal, and that is true. However, no one office is going to be right next to the other, not from my experience anyway. And I think, Terry, we've gone 5 years around that point. You will see suit and tie, you will see nice dresses, nice skirts, but you will also see tennis shoes. A lot of the House staff and officials, they will wear tennis shoes, and they will have a pair of dress shoes, whether that's loafers, whether for the ladies that's heels, that they'll pull out of their bag. So I highly encourage that. I made the mistake one year, my very first year, and I was in a good 5-inch pair of stilettos, and I love those shoes. My feet were burnt, my back was burnt by the end of the day. So I definitely will tell first timers, don't do that. You can definitely carry them with you in your bag. You are security checked as you come and as you go. Shoes are acceptable, and you will see other staff members actually taking those shoes off and changing into their dress shoes after they enter and get settled. So again, the meetings are all spread out. While it may seem as if they're going to be on the next floor up, there is a lot of walking that takes place. So you definitely want to be prepared with the right clothes and the right shoes.
Love that. Terry, have you found that there's a way to measure progress that is made during these events? And this isn't a question. I'm not trying to throw you a curveball here, but it's just something that came up as we were sitting here talking today. But I think a lot of folks, they think about events like this and they're like, how much of an impact am I really going to make? It's almost like when there's this big push during elections, get out and vote. Well, yeah, I'm only one vote. People, I think, are going to have that concern in similar fashion here. Well, there's plenty of other people going to 911 goes to Washington. I don't need to go. Or if I go, I'm just going to how do you gauge that? How do you measure that? What is the metric for determining the success of that messaging coming across?
So my stance, this is just my own stance, because there's nothing scientific to it. I'm sure Jonathan would, if you went into it thinking that we're all going to give it our all and this is going to we're going to get both initiatives passed, well, that frustration would have burnt us all out years ago, because we've been trying for years to get the 911 saves through. Getting the federal funding is a fairly new initiative. However, how I gauge the success is when I shoot an email and I can get a response from someone who I built a relationship with. When I make a phone call, or when they make a phone call to me, I've built that relationship. When they have questions about something, they reach out. That is my gauge of a success. Because when I first went, and I keep saying about that video, that the webinar that Jonathan posted on the NENA website, I wish I would have watched it first, because when I went initially, Kia and I had this grandiose idea of how it was going to be. We were going to go, and then we end up speaking with a staffer next to the bathroom. in the hallway. And I felt defeated and I felt like a waste of time. Well, that actual meeting really turned into something big for my organization 4 years ago in a funding bill that was completely separate from 911 Goes to Washington. Well, we start building those small relationships and it grows and it grows. And we get that personability, that connection that we get. And then when the bill passes, great. But it's been my experience, and I am not a lobbyist. I have zero experience in it, so I don't speak for Jonathan and NENA. But I don't think that the bills have not passed due to a lack of trying. There's always an external resource or there's a competing interest. So just because we don't get what we're going for doesn't mean that the legislators do not value it. There's just other things that are in the priority for them. So I don't measure the success of 911 Goes to Washington with are those two agenda items, those main items, do they succeed? My measure is, do I build a relationship? Am I connecting with other directors throughout the US? The directors that are locally? There's some other executive directors from the districts here in Texas that I get to see, that I only get to see. I mean, they're down the road from me, but I only get to see them at these conferences. So that is my measure. Am I getting good connections? Am I networking well? Am I learning from that? That Monday morning session is extremely valuable to me because they really do a good job of teaching you what is going on at the big picture. And then that empowers me. And when me and Kia go to our meetings, we know what we're going to say and we know what we're going to do. So that is my gauge, and I'll let, he's the lobbyist, I'm not, so.
Yeah, I actually wanted to follow up on that because in terms of measuring progress, which is a great question, and sometimes if you feel you come to GTW, you advocate for the bill and it doesn't pass. And to his point, there are a lot of pressing things that Congress has to address, and it's always about priorities. And unfortunately, sometimes we get dropped, or particularly with the funding bills, there are other issues not related to Next Generation 911 that sometimes slow down that legislation. But more importantly, the progress, and I can tell you after every GTW that I've been here, because of someone's meeting, that office will actually proactively reach out to me and say, hi, someone came to our office and talked to us about saves, and we'd like to know more about it or join. It kind of, like I said, it confirms to that member of Congress that this is a priority for a constituent. And very often, like I said, I'm a lobbyist, so I'm more easily dismissible. But a constituent is not. And it's a better relationship for me if I'm following up with an office because they know their constituents care about it. And then, like I said, like I alluded to before, there could be times when there is a separate, non-related bill, whether it's a disaster relief bill, they'll ask me, how is 911 faring in this, or it's a different unrelated issue, but it touches 911. They now know that they have somewhere to go. And maybe I won't have the particular answer, but now I can set them up with someone from their office, or sorry, from their district, who can educate them about how this particular issue will affect them. So yeah, there is immediate impacts by coming and talking to your member, because like I said, we get more co-sponsors. But also, as kind of come up several times, it's the relationships that you build that you don't know where or when that may show up, but they can be critical.
I do have one more point I want to share on what Jonathan said, but I want to remind everybody watching today, if you have any questions for any of our panelists or just a general question, feel free to drop that into the Q&A window. We're about 15 minutes away from the top of the hour, so we're going to keep plugging away here, but feel free to drop questions in. Jonathan, you talked about, people coming back and saying, hey, we had a person stop by. I was going to say, have business cards with you, or, and that's, I think, okay, I'm a tech guy, right? So I'm walking around with my phone with a QR code saying, here you go, scan this QR code. So even if you don't have business cards and you can't print them up, fast enough to get out there, you can get a quick little QR code that takes them to like a LinkedIn page or something like that. But have your contact information readily available. I mean, I think a lot of folks go into this with this false sense that, oh, they're entertaining me being there just because I'm there. A lot of these staffers, a lot of these folks that are there, especially if you're a constituent, as Jonathan said, they want to hear what you have to say, and this is their one and only opportunity to do that. So I think that's a big piece of that. Kia, I want to come over to you for a second and talk a little. Oh, sorry,
Jeremy,
Terry, you had a point?
I just wanted to make sure you knew that we do have some questions in the chat. I just wanted to make sure you knew that.
See oh, wait a minute. Maybe that's what the new post button is all about. That I thought it was going to update automatically, but it did not. So let me just hit that really quick. Oh, look at them all. Holy cow. Yep. Good thing you guys saw them. All right. Okay. All right, folks. I hadn't looked at this one before, so I thought it was going to come up automatically. Will the current administration, I'm not sure about, I don't see that one there. As far as any administration questions, those kind of things, it's kind of early to tell on that. We may be able to expand on that offline, but I don't think we're going to be able to address that today. Are there grants?
Yeah. I actually, just to answer that question quickly, our issue has never been the administration. It's like I said, this tends to just be kind of get bogged down in Congress. So I don't see the change of administration per se as positive or negative. They've both been positive. So it's more about getting it through Congress.
All right. Well, so Jonathan, I appreciate you covering that for the person that asked the question. Now that I know I have to hit the refresh button, I will go back and look at this. And I know there are a few questions. So Terry, thank you for making me aware of that. Kia, the one of the things I was thinking about was the personal stories side of this, because a lot of times we go in and it's maybe it's generic, right? Maybe it's, hey, here's why you should support it. Here's those kind of things. I think some of the folks that I've found the most success with that are going out and having these conversations with their elected officials are the ones that can really paint that picture appropriately. They can come in and say, hey, you know what, I'm a call taker, I'm a dispatcher, I'm a supervisor, whatever it happens to be. These are some of the major pain points, some of the challenges that we're facing. I think being able to paint that picture effectively, the whole theater of the mind thing and these elected officials being able to hear the story. Do you agree? Is that something that people should be working on a little bit before they go out to these visits?
Absolutely. And it just goes back to what we started the conversation off with having different segments of your organization attend 911 Goes to Washington, because those are the people, I'm not sitting at a console every single day, but I have some amazing staff who do. And so being able to take their story, take their experience, and connect those dots like you're talking about are definitely valuable. And again, it goes to those tours. It goes to you providing your business cards and your contact information. Even if you don't want to have elected officials inside of your centers or your communication centers or your cities, there are other ways to make sure that you're getting that information out and sowing those seeds to really show what 911 does, to really show what those first responders are doing in the center. Again, videos, your recruitment videos, a lot of stuff we already have in place now can be tools to use when educating our local officials to make sure they really understand the importance of 911 and the initiatives that we're trying to push. Be resilient. 911 is the most resilient classification and employment ever. So use that same resilience and don't give up, like Terry mentioned, when you go to the Hill visits and you're like, oh my God, maybe I didn't get through to somebody. Use that opportunity to really sow those seeds, because if you get one person that goes, oh my God, I didn't know 911 does that. Yeah. That is a seed well sown.
How about, this is a question from one of our viewers that says, are there grants available for individuals that want to go to Washington that are unable to go due to budgets not covering the trip? I know that not every person that is out there working in a center, Terry, has the luxury of having, number one, the staffing, and number two, the budget to go to this. Are any of you aware? I mean, I've got a couple I can think of off the top of my head. Are any of you aware of any specific grants out there that would help people get to This Goes to Washington if they weren't able to go on their own?
I don't, in our area, I don't know of any. I don't know. I've never heard of NENA doing any grants for it, but I don't know. We're not part of a district here in Texas, so some of the districts may, if you're in Texas, but I've not heard of any grant for this.
So NENA does have the Laura Flaherty scholarship for GTW. It's more for, or it's geared towards chapter leadership who are trying to go to Washington, and we tend to prioritize people or folks who have not previously been to 911 Goes to Washington. But it's a limited one, and I think the application closed about 2 weeks ago.
Okay. I know there are some things, depending on which state you happen to be from, your local APCO, your local NENA chapter, whatever they happen to be. A lot of them will often put together grants specifically for these types of things. And you can certainly, a lot of them have like educational tie-ins as well. You have to be able to show that you're picking up knowledge and those kind of things relative to the industry. So I would have to imagine 911 Goes to Washington would qualify. But I would also ask you, recommend any of you looking for grants or that, reach out to your local chapters and see if there's anything that can be done there. One
Jeremy,
last
really
oh,
quick, I'm sorry. I'd
Kate,
like
go
to
ahead.
add too, there is a platform that you can look into. It's called Grant Station. You can get it sometimes for a discount if you go through a vendor to purchase it. And what you can do is search and look at program objectives and criteria for education sort of grants. Now, if you're tied to a police department or a fire department, you type in public safety, and there could be some sort of grant funding available to you there. But again, you'd have to just read through the objectives, the programs, make sure your agency qualifies. But Grant Station, I think, is a great resource as well.
Yeah, the other thing I would tell you too, and again, I having sat in all the different seats as well as being the director of two different centers, ask your leadership. Don't make assumptions about budgets, staffing, any of those things. I mean, the biggest thing I can tell you, and I would tell all my people, is go in and have a conversation with your director and say, hey, look, I'm interested in going to this, and I think you'd be pleasantly surprised how many times that director is going to see that initiative and they're going to say, you know what?
Yep.
Yeah, I'm going to send you. There's one more question here, and then there's one more point I want to bring in. And again, we're about 8-9 minutes out. So it says, is there any advantage to attending 911? I love this question. Is there any advantage to attending 911 Goes to Washington if your state has already met the initiatives? For example, Arizona already recognizes 911 as first responders. As such, our agency has not attended. What do you guys think about that?
I say yes, 100%. And the reason I say it is exactly what I said earlier. Because NENA's only going to give you 2 initiatives, but there is so much more that you're going to educate your representative. You're going to learn who they are. They're going to learn who you are. There may be funding bills down the road for NG 911 that they may need some input on. You're going to build that relationship. We have a building that was being built. There was a federal funding initiative done for that. So you may create a whole branch that is just personal to you that has nothing to do with those 2 initiatives that NENA is doing. So my stance is it's 100%. Anytime you can build a relationship with a legislator and their staff, is a good day.
And just in terms of the reclassification, I'm not sure exactly how it was done in Arizona. I mean, a lot of the states have. I think close to either a third or a half have some sort of reclassification. However, because it's not recognized at the federal level, that does put limits on what can be done with that reclassification. So most times when a state or a county or municipality does reclassify, it's only in name only, and it can't actually extend to benefits. It cannot extend to pensions or retirement plans. And to the further point, if it's not recognized nationally, it actually hinders the data collection that we can do nationally on 911. So even if a state has already reclassified, like for example, California has, and so has Texas, they still send large delegations. And also to echo Terry's point, showing up only when you need something is difficult because you need your friends when you're up against the wall, but you build them when you're not. So it's important to show up whenever you can.
Yeah, and who better to demonstrate that and show up than coming from a state where it's been adopted? We're making it work. We're showing the value there. I love that. Marie, I want to reach out to you real quick to see if any questions snuck in any way in any other forums. I want to make sure. I really feel bad that Terry had to remind me that there were questions there. I think I've gotten through all those, but Marie, anything else slipped through that I didn't see, or have we got everything?
Yeah, I think we covered everything from the Q&A.
Okay.
Let me see here. I guess there were a few people that joined throughout the meeting after it started, like well into the webinar today. So I
Okay.
think one last question, just to kind of wrap things up, that I think would be nice to kind of go over just briefly again, would be how can 911 professionals effectively advocate for emergency communication improvements at this event? I think that's a nice tie-up, question.
Kia, you want to start that one?
Oh, you're so kind.
Yeah. I'll have Marie reread that question just in case. Marie, you want to
Yeah,
Absolutely.
one
reread
more
that
time, Marie.
Absolutely. So, how can 911 professionals effectively advocate for emergency communication improvements at this event?
Yeah. It goes right back. Research. Make sure you understand what is happening. And if you don't know globally, that's okay. Your center. What are the areas that are affecting your center? What are some of the representatives that you're going to be seeing and what are their talking points? We're talking about the Saves Care. We're talking about NG911. Look up those strategies and see how that affects you and what you can bring back to your center. The more information you have to start off with, the better. And again, attending that first session that everyone keeps hitting on is so great and it's essential. It gives you a foundation to start from. So then you have more information, more than even when you came in. So again, you apply that with what you know, you're researching beforehand, you're talking and networking with one another, and now you have more of a solid foundation to really go far and go ahead with this agenda.
Jonathan, any thoughts? Oh, Terry, I wasn't sure which one you were going to go first, so.
I'll let Jonathan go.
Oh, I was just gonna thank you. I was just say also come prepared with some stories or examples from your daily experience.
Yes.
It's very easy to assume that they know what you do, but they probably don't. They may have no idea. They likely have no idea how a 911 call is handled. How you handle all the different priorities that come in, and the training that's involved, and in many cases the trauma that can be involved with being on a call for so long. So come prepared with those examples, or at least examples you're willing to share, because it drives the message home, but it also and humanizes it. But it also, like I said, it educates them on issues that they may not know about.
Yeah, I think many times we as professionals in the space make assumptions about what the public knows about what we do. And I've had people come up, now that there's some popular TV shows, which I won't name, but there are some popular TV shows out there now about what we do. And, I'm sure that law enforcement officers have been getting this question for years, but now that we have our own shows out there, they're like, how realistic is it? And I'm like, well, it is and it isn't. But in any event, I think to all of your points, I don't think we want to we don't want to have assumptions or make assumptions about what we think our elected officials know about what we do. So again, to points already made, those compelling stories, those things that really for you were kind of like, as much as you're comfortable sharing it, they were pivotal moments for you in your 911 career. Those are the things that really resonate with folks that you're telling that to for the first time. Terry, go ahead.
Actually, Jonathan took what I was going to say. It's literally, I think,
you let him go first. So
a real story beats an education session all day long. A real story, real lives, real effects to the communities that those representatives are their constituents, showing how this technology, good or bad, if there's some centers that don't have really good, their representatives need to know that. And they give examples of, we had someone called 911 due to staffing because we can't recruit. We could not. However, if we were registered, if we were classified public safety, it would give these benefits. That would increase our recruiting. And if we had staff, the call would have been answered. Time is money. Representatives don't know that we have 90 seconds to get the call out. And a house doubles in size on a fire every minute. So these little tidbits that you tell them and why time is so important, and real stories of success and real stories of tragedy. I think that goes a long way, because I would venture to say 911's less than 75 years old. So it's a very new profession. And a lot of these representatives, I bet, think that when they call 911, a cop's answering. They don't realize there's an entire profession out there. So my recommendation is exactly what Jonathan said. Come with some real stories, not just talking points.
Well, we are right at the top of the hour, about 30 seconds left here. I just want to say, first of all, thank you to the three of you for being here today. I am super excited to be convening with all of you guys and gals in DC next week. I think I speak for all of you when I say anybody that's on the session today, if you're going to 911 Goes to Washington for the first time and you see any of the four of us, please come up, introduce yourself, say hello. If you have questions, please ask questions. Again, to points already made, there's no dumb questions here. Inevitably, somebody else has that same question. But as we close, again, thank you to the three of you for being here today. Safe travels to all of you and all of you going. Just to kind of recap for everybody, the Share.Solve.Evolve webinar series is a monthly webinar series put on by Intrado to cover challenges and pain points in the 911 industry. So if you have a topic or something you'd like us to present on, please feel free to drop me a line and let me know. I want to thank my colleague, my partner in crime here, Marie, who does an exceptional job both prior to these sessions, during the session, and post-session to make sure these things go well. This will be available for viewing after the session's over with. Usually takes us a week or so to get that done, but we'll have it available for you. But on behalf of the entire Intrado team, Marie, myself, thank you all for being a part of Share.Solve.Evolve today, and safe travels all going to 911 Goes to Washington. Have a great day, everybody.
Have a good one. Thank
you.
you all.
Have a great day. Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Look forward to seeing
Thanks.
everybody.
Take care, guys.